Hello, this video is about the state of SEO in 2020, where SEO is now, where it's been, and where I see it going into the future. And I'm going to start off by talking about a little bit about me. I'm David Hood, Dallas SEO Geek, just so you have some context as to where I'm coming from. I'm not somebody who just kind of read a few articles and then is regurgitating the information out there. I've been doing SEO since 2009, so a little over 10 years, full-time since 2012, so I did it on the side while I was an engineer. And I've been ranking on the first page since 2013 for Dallas SEO related terms. And right now I'm number 1 for Dallas SEO, and I've been ranking high on the first page for my biggest term probably since about 2016. I don't remember the exact date. And I've been focusing a lot on maps lately, and that's an intentional decision because I think maps has become more important over time, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. So also I want to point out that what I'm talking about is based upon data. Okay, and here's a funny Dilbert cartoon about data. This isn't based upon, so Google puts out information about this is how to do SEO, and there's a lot of half-truths in it and a lot of things missing. And then there's also a lot of people out there who are writing articles about SEO, putting content out there about SEO, who've never actually ranked a website by themselves. Either they're a hired writer or they've done like little pieces of SEO and they've been part of projects that already have massive advantages, and they just do kind of the standard stuff, and they kind of get to take credit for other people's work to a significant degree. I've done a lot of projects basically from scratch where there's nothing to something high on the first page. And not just my website, but other people's websites as well. And I have a lot of test sites out there. And this is really, really important because there's a lot of weird stuff that you wouldn't expect that is not common knowledge out there that is part of Google's algorithm, and just part of weird things that you can do that work, and weird things that you would think that would help you actually hurt you or don't help you. There's a lot of strange scenarios, and there's just a lot of different conditions that you wouldn't believe existed if you didn't experience it with data, if you didn't actually walk through it. I like to compare like learning SEO to, let's say, learning how to shoot the basketball from Dirk Nowitzki. It's not like you can't just read a book over a weekend or a handful of articles about how to shoot a basketball and then be an excellent shooter. You actually have to go in there and experience it and walk through the day-to-day and do some stuff and see how Google responds. And I have several thousand, maybe tens of thousands of different examples where I've done stuff. I've recorded the data in very good detail and documented it really well so that I can see, okay, when this happens, and I can get a lot of different data points, and I can get a deeper understanding of some of the concepts out there. Some of them are true, and some of them are kind of half true, or they're missing some major pieces. So what I'm going to talk about in here is not based upon what should be true, not based upon reading an article, or not based upon what Google says. This is based upon real data of testing and seeing what happens when I do different stuff. Okay, so let's talk about Google's algorithm. There are other search engines out there, but Google's obviously the biggest one, and they have been for a very long time. And here's a funny thing with Google, when their search suggests how to sneak in the zoo and look at the penguins. I mean, obviously, why wouldn't you want to do that? So I want to point out that I think they really like where their algorithm is right now. I want to talk about like my chaos theory. I can't spell theory. It's kind of a myth out there, and it's kind of related. So that they really like where their algorithm is right now, and there's not a lot of major changes, except there's a few exceptions I'm going to talk about in a second that I see in the future and that have happened recently. There's really not major changes. Yes, there are some people who are hit by a very specific algorithm, and they see major changes because they have a single site and it's making a bunch of money that drops maybe 99% overnight in terms of traffic. That does happen, but that doesn't mean that the algorithm as a whole is changing significantly. There's this idea that and I call it SEO chaos theory, where there's a ton of people out there who say that, and there's kind of an understood as being true, even though it's false, that Google's algorithm, you never know, it changes all the time. You got to stay up to date every moment of every little minor algorithm change, and this is not true. I can count on one hand the amount of major algorithm changes that Google has had since their beginning, since 20 years ago. All right, and so yes, again, there are specific situations where they maybe target specific techniques or specific industries, and they do some weird stuff there. But in terms of like major fundamental shifts and how they evaluate and how things rank, there's only a handful of those. All right, and so the fundamentals of their algorithm have not really changed that much, or they don't change that often. All right, and I think they really like where they're at, especially when it comes to non-maps results. And the map stuff, they're still playing with a lot more, and that's one of the areas where I see the most change, and which is where there's a lot of stuff that's just that started working in the last couple of years with regards to maps. They've been changing that algorithm quite a bit. That a lot is just not really well known, and even to people, full-time SEO people, and that's why I've done a lot of testing on that as well. So let's talk about what I would consider to be kind of the 4 buckets of SEO activity. And you can kind of split some of these buckets up and put things in different places, and that's totally legitimate. Especially the on-page, where I include like keyword research. I'm putting under here, even though it could probably be its own thing, and in some projects this is less important. In some projects this is super important to do lots of detailed keyword research. I'm putting it under on page because it has to do with what's going on your site mostly. That's really where like the direct effect that you get, but it does affect the off page and the maps and even the engagement to some degree. Okay, so engagement SEO. This is something where I have some really crazy case studies that you would not believe, where they are tracking. Google is tracking how people respond to specific searches in terms of how engaged they are to this. Now, this is one of the major developments that they've had over the last 20 years. I can't remember exactly when they started implementing this. It's pretty old. It's maybe 7 to 10 years old. They started really implementing this heavily into the algorithm. And so, because ultimately, this is sort of like the Trump factor. If they are sending traffic to your website and the visitors are loving it and engaging with it to a high degree, that's ultimately what their purpose is. Okay. And all other factors can kind of be damned. If you have super high or super low engagement, it can really help you or really hurt you. That said, it's not really where you start, because they're not going to send you visitors right out of the gate. At least not very many. And so their data is not super complete. And so, but it is something that you want to be aware of. And this is why I like videos a lot. I do recommend using videos on your website, as I do on mine, because videos are the most engaging form of content. On top of that, Google owns YouTube, and YouTube videos can rank by themselves in YouTube. YouTube is a big search engine by itself, but just in terms of like content on your site, videos are going to be the most engaging. They're going to help you sell better. In general, obviously, some industries it's different than others. In some industries it's not really possible. Or reasonably possible to do videos, but you want to just try to keep them on your site as long as possible. You want to speak directly to your target market. It's more important to have engaging content than it is to have a lot of content. And Google is watching that. Even if people don't go to the search engine, they still have a lot of ways to see a lot of the traffic that's going on out there. Okay, so for local businesses maps, this is where I see the most change over the last couple of years in terms of how Google ranks their maps listings. And I think this is also becoming more important as their maps listings take up more space in the search results. Actually, their ads as well are taking up more space, because they're trying to compensate for the fact that was like 85% of people never ever click on ads. And so they're trying to make more money, and they make most of their money. I think over 90% of their money comes from the ads in the search results. And so naturally, okay, well, let's put more ads there. Let's make them, more likely to be clicked on by taking more space up. And so what this has done is it's pushed down the non-maps results, and especially on the mobile device. So if you're a local business, maps is super critical. If you rank number 1 below the maps, that's well below the fold, which is well below sort of like the initial screen. And so while it still will get traffic, it won't get nearly as much as the maps. But also there's a lot of misunderstanding on how maps works. It really, like what maps results they serve up can vary widely across different cities. So Dallas is a pretty big city. In North Dallas versus South Dallas, you might get 3 completely different results for the same keyword, depending on where you're sitting. You can also get different results at the same location with different devices, with your mobile device and your desktop device. And there's other factors, weird factors like that can affect what maps results come up. So the way I look at this is not like, oh, I rank X for this keyword in the maps. It's more like how much influence does a maps listing have in terms of different keywords overall. So it's a little bit more complicated view to it, and there's a lot of weird stuff that you can do that very few people are doing with regards to maps that really help increase the influence of your maps listings. And it's super, super important, and it's one of the best ways to drive business with maps. If I could choose between ranking number one in the regular organic, or having a lot of really good maps listings, top 3 for a lot of good keywords, and not having the regular organic, I would choose the maps every single time by far and away, with the exception if you had like really poor reviews on your Google listing, which is a whole other issue in of itself. But if that's the case, okay, well, maybe that's not going to help you. But by and large, the maps are super, super important. Okay, so we have OnPage. This is basically what's going on your site, your domain name, the titles, the URLs of your pages. This is a pretty simple thing overall, like in terms of the concepts of what really matters, and there's a lot less. 99% of what matters from an on-page standpoint can be accounted for with just a handful of factors. Even though you have these lists of people with like 101 things to do for SEO, they generalize SEO, and it's all. First of all, it's all on page. So they don't talk about engagement. They don't talk about maps. They don't talk about off page a lot of the times. But there's really a handful. Under most circumstances, there are some things like site speed that don't matter until they do matter. If it's really, really poor, then it does matter. But if it's the difference between being good and really good is not going to really affect your rankings at all. Off-page SEO. This has to do with links pointing back to your site. Google's algorithm. This is one of the major developments that they came up with 20 years ago, is basically a popularity contest. So when another website links back to you, then that's like a vote of confidence. Now, this is where a lot of the changes over the last 10 years have come from in the off-page area. And I think that they've settled on this pretty well. There are some things that they're still doing, and there is still some change that's happening here in terms of the quality and the relevancy and the trust of the links matters more and more over time. But and I think that how you define those 3 factors is really misunderstood in my industry. But having good off-page matters. You just need it. It's sort of like authority in your industry, and without it's not impossible to rank, especially for like low competition searches. But for high competition stuff, it's very, very, it's almost impossible unless there's some really weird conditions where it can happen, but it usually does not. And it is it's still a critical part of ranking for anything competitive. So definitely you want to have a plan to do off page. And one thing to point out here is that where you rank in the maps is affected heavily by on page and off page. And off page tends to be the most expensive part of SEO. It just is. It's a really complicated thing. It's a lot of work, and it's very expensive. The map stuff can be very expensive as well. It depends on your situation. There's a lot of work that can be done there, and you just can't do it all. There's just an unlimited amount of work that you can do there. And with the off page, again, it tends to do it right is very, very difficult, and not many people can do it, and that's why it's so expensive. Okay, so long term, kind of looking forward, I see the off page going more towards relevancy, authority, and trust. I think the on-page hasn't changed a whole lot. There are a few things that are a little bit different, but overall, like that, this has been their steadiest factor. With maps, I think they really like where they're going, and I can anticipate getting more and more kind of customized results for the maps, but that the general direction of some of the techniques are still going to be applicable, and it's going to be a huge focus. They like maps because they make more money, because people stay on their platform longer, okay, and it makes it harder for people in the SEO industry to really game the system when they have a little bit more eyes and data on what's happening. And they make more money, and that's really what they're all about. They're a corporation trying to make money. I don't see, it's easy to say this. I don't see any super fundamental changes in the future. It's not that it's impossible. There's always people going, oh, well, now they're going to do this, and it's going to be fundamentally changed. But by and large, there have been very, very few of those where really the bark is much worse than the bite for a lot of people in terms of how is it going to affect your business. Okay, so thank you for watching. If you're still with me, if you want a free SEO analysis and recommendations for your business, feel free to give me a call, 214-504-384, or go to DallasSEOGeek.com and fill out a contact form on there, and I should get it in my email, or you can email me directly at david@DallasSEOGeek.com. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.